All right, I believe we are live. Hello, everybody. How are you?
G'day.
G'day. Welcome to CoCoTALK number 8, the nation's leading live talk show on the Tandy Color computer. Well, it's the only one, so right now it's leading all by itself. So we've got a distinguished panel of distinguished people here. I'll just go around the room here in my top left-hand corner from Australia, Nick Marentes. Good day.
Good day, everyone.
We have keynote speaker, entertainer extraordinaire, Rick Adams with us. How are you, Rick?
Oofda.
All right.
Hello from Minnesota there.
Minnesota. All right. We have in the snowstorms of the automobile, Bill Noble in Canada. Hey, how you doing, Bill? And then we have Grant Leedy again with us. How are you, Grant? I'll take that as a good. Joining us for the first time is Richard Cavell from the UK. How are you, Richard?
Hello, everyone.
All right. With us, as always, the lovely and talented Mark Overholzer. How are you, Mark?
Hanging in there.
With us as always. Is that Bill?
Here, nice and warm.
I did not understand a word that just came out of whoever just spoke there. Somebody's having a bandwidth challenge. I don't know if that was Bill or Grant there.
I think it was Grant.
Was that Grant? All right. It sounded like a mentally challenged person on Quaaludes for a minute there. So, but we'll give you a minute to get your bandwidth worked out there. We have with us the person with multiple personalities, David Ladd, aka Drencor, aka Paco Otacte. How are you, David?
I'm doing fine, sir.
And the creator of Strongware and all things 3D printed, John Strong, is with us today. And last but not least, we have Jacob and Bruce Moore, also in Canada, the authors and co-authors and graphic artists and video and photo editors of the soon-to-be-released Forest of Doom that will break all software sales records nationwide. So,
The Forest of Doom.
The Forest of Doom. All right, so we also have in chat, we have Curtis Boyle, Curtis has no fear. David's taking up 3 Skype call entries to cover his personalities. Yes. So we're back. We actually have 8 people watching us, although some of them could be us watching ourselves, for all I know. But we got things to talk about. John Strong mentioned he has some announcements he'd like to make. Would you like to kick off with your announcements, John?
Yes. For those who could not make it to CoCo Fest, and I have some batch of Bomb Squad games to them.
Okay.
And so, didn't know I wanted to announce this, and I thought, well, let's do this on a CoCoTALK. So they'd be your $40 for the cost, the CoCo Fest price, plus $8 shipping. And anybody interested in those need to contact me in email. And when my quantity's out, I've got about 10 of them. Or let's make this till next week. Get people incentivized to do it if they want it. And we'll see if I renew the offer next week if I've got any left.
Okay. Why don't you hold it closer to the camera so we can see the beauty of the 2-color on the cartridge there. Bomb Squad. Yeah, that's a beauty, eh? Custom 3D printed case in red and black to go along with the custom game. Shrink wrapped package in the official Tandy cartridge box there. Radio Shack TRS-80 color computer program pack. Yeah, it is chock full of nostalgia, and it's a modern game. It's good.
And so wanted to do that. Wanted to make an official CoCo Flash announcement that cases are available for it.
Have you got a show and tell?
And
Curtis mentioned it also has the bomb-shaped thumb grips on the sides to pull the cartridge out. I don't know if you're able to give us a view of the side of the bomb. And we have to make sure now we don't confuse Bomb Squad with Bomb Threat, because we got a couple of new bomb games coming out for the CoCo right now. Now, it's kind of hard to see there, but yeah, I can kind of barely just see it. But yeah, when you go to grab the cartridge from the side, instead of it just being notches, they're actually bombs, engraved bombs, right? So.
Yeah, I'm kind of using the iPad Touch today because I've got a bunch of CoCo things I need to get done here in a little bit, and didn't want to set the laptop up for it, so not quite as good as video.
Oh, so you have the new iPad that you can actually touch. You got one of those models. The iPad Touch, he says. As opposed to all the non-touch enabled iPads out there.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking touch. It's just the mini iPad is one I've got out.
There you go. I'm messing with you.
Oh, I know you are. And I had up Skype on the new iPad Pro, so.
Ah, nice.
And that's big as setting up a laptop. So
you software developers and your buckets of cash that you have to buy all these extravagancies.
Well, it's not buckets.
Excuses.
It's sometimes you do that. I have to support Apple at work. In fact, I have a MacBook Pro that I had to be on the phone a couple hours with on Apple to get reset back up that one of our employees sent in. So
Teacups full of cash.
Teacups full of cash, Rick Adams says. I like that one.
Teacups full of pennies.
Yeah, it's like it's an ashtray full of change, right? So
yeah. The CoCo Flash is a case is available for $15 plus shipping.
I forgot if you answered us, but did you have one you could show us? Show and tell on the CoCo Flash cartridge case?
I've got them. I'm just trying to remember where I've got it setting.
Okay.
In this room of things.
What is the Skype link? Richard, send me a friend request on Skype. What is the Skype link? I'll try to put that out there. Okay, that's my software. I'm losing my screen here. How do I get to? I don't know if I have Richard as a Skype friend, so I'm not sure if I can easily do that right now. But Richard, if you can send me a friend request on Skype, because I just lost my screen. I can't see what the hell's going on right now.
Evidently not handy. Okay.
So, no problem.
Apologies for that. I didn't think of it.
I think it was the back of John's chair that you were looking at.
Yes. And got this aimed up so you don't see all the mess in this room.
Right.
But so it's available. It just simply has cutouts for it. And,
okay.
It's easy enough if somebody wants to use one of the molded plastic ones to put the holes in it. If you want to do that, but I do have ones that you don't have to.
Okay, and you said those will be available for $15?
Yes.
Okay. Will you have a picture of that on your Strongware website? Because I have a link to that on my site.
I need to. Oh, okay. I found it. Yeah, this is with the CoCo Flash installed in it.
Okay.
It's a fairly simple case. It's got a hole for the LED on the top. Okay. Screw on the bottom.
Okay.
So there's space if you want to put a label or anything on top.
And then notice the headphone jack is in the center there.
Yes.
And what are the two buttons? I'm assuming those buttons are something to do with the CoCo Flash itself. I don't own a CoCo Flash, so
you can access them through the code. I don't think the code is coming with them. Use them for anything. At least not that I've noticed. I'm looking at the code, but those are readable. And I kind of thought they should do like up-down buttons for the menu or something like that. But at this time, I don't think they're using them for anything. Nobody's turned them on with software yet.
Okay. It's a nice looking cartridge. Are you able to reuse some of your designs since the overall dimensions are about the same?
Some of them I have been able to reuse. Some they don't. the fact that I'm using a freeware CAD program complicates things. Sometimes it will let me resize things just fine, and other times it wants to crash out on it. So
Wow.
actually, this one, I believed I was able to reuse some spacing on this, and it made it a lot faster to develop this one.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Any more progress on what you're doing with all of your sound and your game development and stuff?
Well, actually, there's a little bit of progress. Actually, I'm probably going to skip out fairly early on this talk to actually test some code out.
Okay.
I've got some code for the audio, the converter, and I'm going to try it on the Cyclone because I don't have anything to let me use the disk drive or use the CoCo SDC and Jim Brain's card. The mini MPI and Jim Brain's prototype is not playing together. And while I can poke through it and get sound out of it through BASIC, once I put it in the mini MPI, it's not working. And this is a case of prototypes and such. So,
Okay.
Jim's aware of that, and hopefully we'll get something worked out so make sure it is compatible. But it limits what I can do with that card here because I don't have a regular MPI at this time. And it's something I know where I can possibly get one from, but it may take a while for me to get one. But I've got some test code I'm going to run on the Cyclone CoCo, which emulates the same chip. It is addressed a little bit differently, so the code has to be a little bit different. And so I've touched that up this week and been too busy to get enough time to test it out. I've been busy making cases from Zipsters and the people who want mini MPIs. So I got another batch order of those this week. And so that's the nice thing that Zipster and I are doing. On the mini MPI, they're all coming with a case, so people don't have to.
Nice. Very nice.
So what that does, is it makes it really nice for people ordering. You don't have to pay shipping twice on it, and so on.
Right.
But on my side, it means I get orders of like 10 of them, and where I'm used to fulfilling orders of 1s and 2s. So it kind of fills my time up getting the order took care of for everybody out there.
Gotcha.
But it's really a great idea and concept for the people. You don't have to worry about installing it in the case. I think Zipster takes care of that, and gives you a nice end product instead of just a board.
Very cool. And what's the mini MPI selling for with the case? I heard it was like $40, $50, something like that.
I think it was $75 with the case.
Oh, $75. Okay, I didn't remember. Okay.
Yeah, and I really kind of hoping that Jim Brain will get his MPI out also, and because I would like to see this new products out there, replacement for the hard to get, becoming hen's teeth almost sometimes.
Yeah.
Products.
That's the challenge. Yeah. So there are a few things that are uncommon to come across, like on eBay and things, and the multi-pack interface being one of them. It's a fairly sought-after item. So having a reliable alternative is a good thing. And based on what they sell for on eBay, I have never seen one selling for less than $100 plus shipping. So the fact that you can get a brand new one for $75 and you know it's going to work and it's going to be compatible is there's savings there. So that's a good thing. And that's very cool. That's very okay. Richard says it's $80. Okay, so Richard just chimed in on the Skype chat saying it's $80. Okay, so it's in that ballpark.
Right.
But that includes the hardware and the case, because the case has to be manufactured as well. So there's some cost. The things you take for granted, like when you buy something, it's already wrapped in plastic. It's already got a molded case for it. But when you create it from scratch, everything has to be invented.
And for us doing it this way, I think we're getting it to the end user a little bit less expensive, because I ship them in bulk to him, and give him a little bit of discount on the case, more than I would do individually.
Yeah.
Because I could sit down and do them in a batch instead of doing them, one at a time. And the MPI, it's a little bit more involved on a case. I've got 11 screws in it, a plastic seat, switch covers. So, I would definitely, if I sound them individually, be sounding a little bit more cost-wise than what I'm giving it to Ed to do it, to help to pass the savings on to everybody to make it a good deal. And, I kind of look at things a little bit differently. Yeah, I got to make money on this stuff, but I want people to be able to afford it.
Yeah.
And in particular, I know the market could bear more than what I sell for the case for the CoCo SDC, but I don't want people, grabbing, FD 502s and using the case and throwing away the board.
Although I've got one that doesn't work, I might be able to do that.
Yeah, but so I try to keep it reasonably priced.
Yeah.
But I have to have enough on there, so I look at it and say, "Oh, I'm not saying, I got to make another one of those. It's been how much time?
Right.
For how much?
Right.
So it's kind of that thing that none of us are getting rich for this, but want to make enough of it off of it that I actually feel like doing it for the person and getting it out there.
Right. Well, we certainly appreciate that.
The first few is like John Linville was talking, making game cartridges and stuff, and to people understand why we do these in batches, it takes a lot of time, and you've got to program the EEPROM, you've got to the solder the board, get the whatever you got on the board there in a socket, or the EEPROM to the board and the capacitors, get it in the case, install that, put it in the box. In my case, I shrink wrap them.
Yeah.
And
that takes time.
I print the manuals up.
And you don't have any Canadian labor you can outsource to either. So at least John has Neil Blanchard. So.
I use Neil as one of my game testers.
There you go.
Okay?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's good.
He's great help with that. Okay.
So it's nice that we have affordable labor south of the border and north of the border. So.
Hey, Steve and John, I think it'd be really fun sometime to actually have John point his camera and see an in action printout of one of his devices.
Yeah, 3D printing taking place.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
You know what that reminds me of? I've never seen it, but I can tell you what I can imagine. If you've ever seen the movie The Fifth Element, they have that scene where they kind of reconstruct her in that glass tube. I kind of imagine that's what the 3D printing process is kind of like, but maybe not quite as fast.
You about have to do a time lapse on it to be interesting, okay, as far as showing there, because it moves so slow.
Okay.
Yeah. And so...
Well, it sounds like watching the old DMP 105 printers printing then.
Yeah, right?
Oh, I love the DMP 105s.
Okay, that piece takes at least 4 hours to print.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah, you definitely need... Is there any way we can throw a few Canadians at that to make it run faster?
Well, the reason, I actually have two printers, and this is one of the reasons for it is, and I have the other printer printing some other parts while these are printing. So,
yeah. Curtis says it's like watching 500K of source code assemble on a real CoCo.
There you go.
Totally exciting. It's done.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're excited when it's done. And in the case of the 3D printing, you're excited when it's done and it comes out right.
Curtis says,
as I say, it's not ready for prime time. And actually, St. Ink Magazine had an article that said that 3D printing is dying, and I would disagree with that. I think it's just starting to grow up, and people realizing that, oh, well, you can imagine a lot of things you can do. It really is not practical to do some of those things with it. And, but, Cases has worked out, a pretty nice item to create.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea that Alan says is the case is turned into a product. So you have something, not just bare case, and boom, now we have something that looks like a product, or it looks a lot closer to like the product.
Yeah.
Depending on what you think of my 3D printing skills.
Yeah.
And design skills.
From what we've seen so far, it's working out pretty well.
And, there's other people who's doing some really kind of cool designs for the CoCo. And I know the Raspberry Pi CoCo case that was at the fest this year.
Yeah, that's
pretty
a
nice
beauty.
looking thing. And,
that's a beauty, eh?
Well, and I went to try to print it on mine with the standard things, and it's, my printer's messing it up just totally.
Oh, yeah.
I think I figured out the possible way to get around that.
It's got a cartridge slot.
Yeah, but I think I'm going to, because it has to be rotated upright to print. And my software that comes with my printer, when it rotates it, it messes some of those layers stuff up, and it's like it doesn't print. And so,
Glenn says that was his 3D model. Well, thank you, Glenn.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I was trying to remember whose it was, but like I said, some great designs being out there.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to realize sometimes what prints on one 3D printer doesn't print on the next 3D printer, or it takes some work out. And I haven't got Glenn's design to print yet.
Well, here's a close-up, too, of your CoCo SDC case, right? So it's just very straight to the point. It's very functional. It's, the lid, you screw the board into the bottom half and you snap the top on, and it just slides right into your CoCo. It's got access to the dip switches here. You've got access to your SD card, to your LED, and to your little button. If I had one wish list item, it would be that button would protrude, so I don't have to stick a pen or something in there when I need to hit it. If it was like a physical button that came out from the cartridge I could push, that would be kind of nice.
Well, I did this and never released it because it was over-designed, too strong, and you couldn't really take the lid off. And I was going to go and fix that, and there was this announcement made there was going to be the CoCo SDC 2, and I thought, well, why spend 2 or 3 weeks playing with this thing and fixing it?
Right.
And there's going to be a new version out. Well, that hasn't happened yet.
Right. Well, that's one of our topics I want to talk about today too, which is brought up, which was I thought was kind of cool. Was is CoCo hardware going too far? When does a CoCo stop becoming a CoCo and becoming something else? So that's probably worth mentioning at that point too.
So this one actually has, I don't know if you can see it here, a little indent around that, so it's a lot easier to press it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Kind of a sculpted shape and stuff.
Yeah.
And I get caught up in things. I may actually go back and redo this and make this available as a custom CoCo SDC case.
Ed Snyder just joined us. He says, "Thank goodness for your case making, John. Much appreciated."
Well, thank goodness for your hardware making, Zipser. Much appreciated.
It's a great team effort there. Yeah.
So, but this is something that I may do. Now it seems that the other product's not coming out, but so I guess while I'm talking here, and so I can go say a couple things, and I can get and work on some of the sound stuff.
And so Ed just said, by the way, SDC2 is not likely to happen, at least anytime soon. Okay.
which is what I'm saying is I need to go ahead and finish this case design because it is a little nicer. That was very functional. I've modified it a little bit over time, but it's basically the first case that I fully designed. And, some design decisions could be different now. I've learned a little bit. But still, it's a very nice functional case.
Oh, exactly.
And that's the idea. It's just something that protects it. It's nice. And it's fun to go to CoCo Fest and walk around and see all the cases and stuff that I've made. Show up different places. And so that's kind of a cool thing.
Definitely.
And so if you don't mind, since I'm already blabbing, I'll go ahead and make my comments on a couple of the other topics, and then I'll get off video here, and so I can get some more CoCo tasks done here.
By all means, blab away.
Okay. All right. We talk about how far is too much. Well, we have our purists who are going to want what was able to be done in the day or was done in the day, and maybe two groups of those, and that's okay. I look at classic cars and I see somebody customize the old Hudson, and I cringe. It's like, oh, yeah, that's beautiful, but why did they have to ruin this classic car?
Right.
So, and to them, it's not ruined, but to me, it's like, yeah, I appreciate the classic, and
so I take it you weren't a big fan of the MTV series Pimp My Ride then either, huh?
Well, I've seen some of those. Some of those are very cool. Some of them are like, and they didn't really do that with little vehicles to me. Okay, there's still a fair quantity of those vehicles they were, modifying. But when you get back into the 50s, into the classic, the Kaisers, the Hudsons, and those things, keep the classics if it's possible. And
sure.
I understand some of those you might get a body shell, and you can't restore it. Okay, there isn't stuff there. Okay, if it can't be restored, all right, customize if you want. But if it's enough there to restore, restore it. But it's just kind of the way I look at it. And I can understand people looking that way on the color computer. And I kind of hit it the other idea, and it's each person, it's your choice what you want to do. But some of the new hardware and stuff could very well been done back in the day, and many times was done back in the day, except the cost was so high in those dollars, you really couldn't have very many people afforded them. That's why they ran out of hands teeth. Okay. Who has a synthesizer card from back in the day out there? Anybody on this call?
Anybody have a MIDI synth for the CoCo from back in the day?
I don't.
There's MIDI cards. The MIDI cards were a little bit more popular, so you can interfaces. You see those, but I would have loved to have the ears, and I had a friend who had one. I actually borrowed it from him for a couple of weeks. Wrote a calculator program for it. It was pretty cool, but I didn't have the money to buy one.
Richard says I have a speech card. Richard, if you're in a Skype call, you can speak up at any time too. You can use your words. Curtis was asking, does anybody remember back in the day when people would hack out their CoCo case to put like a Model 1 or Model 3 keyboard into a CoCo?
Well, I actually had in my model, my first CoCo, Radio Shack stored a keyboard that just didn't have any board or anything, and I actually went in and wired it up and put it in my original CoCo 1. Okay, so I'd have a good full travel keys in the CoCo 1, and wired it all up. So yeah, those things were happening, and so it's happened from day one. Okay, that people have modified their computers, so it's not out of even being a purist to go ahead and modify it.
Right. And nobody's making you buy this hardware. It's not like it's not like Putin's coming in here saying you must install VGA board, comrade.
For $50 you can have. That's not including the case, but I think it's $45.50. The CoCo Flash, something like that. You go to Jim's Brains Retro Innovation site and get the actual details on the cost. But you have an Orchestra 90 card that's got a ton of flash memory. You can put your game cartridges on it. Okay. For much less than the original price for the Orchestra 90 back. And that's in today's dollars, not how much in the Orchestra 90 if you considered that in the dollars. That $90 would have cost you there.
Right.
Okay. I've said it before. The reason we could afford one, they finally dropped down. We was buying for $15 or less. And we had a sound speech card. And I never developed software for that because didn't think enough people would have it. For one, two. Secondly, very hard to develop for because of the slowness of response on the system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you have those things. And my CoCo 1, we maxed it out to 512K? J&R Banker? Okay. And mine was the least modified of some of the people I knew. Okay. I had some systems that I'd picked up later that had 256 joystick port installed, different other things, they were widely hacked, okay? With all kinds of things put inside and connected to them. So if they're being hacked, that's in the tradition of the CoCo.
Right.
When is it too far? I don't know if it is. But I don't think we reached that level. But you have to remember, back in the day, we had things like Z80 card, word packs. Don't know if it was actually ever released, but I know it was advertised. A 68008 add-in card.
Wow.
So a lot of things were advertised and and done, and I think we're just keeping with that tradition. So if you say you want us to be traditional, well, we are.
Right.
Okay. The only people that I think that so far that I'm seeing out there that really don't match that might be our field programmer grade array systems.
Right, when you're building it from scratch.
Okay.
Then you have all these other features you add to it and stuff, yeah.
But I actually applaud that because, again, we're talking about, when it's going to be,
Right. And yeah.
So can I jump over, on one of those and develop my app on that and run it on a CoCo? And it allows me to speed up my development time. So it means you get a cooler, I could output more.
We have some stuff in chat here. Let me just go through this real quick. So Curtis was saying he remembers a J&R Banker. He didn't have it though. Then he said that Colorware Alpha Products used to sell a slot extender with 8 or 12 slots and hardware expansion cards for it. Micro RGS in Canada sold a 68008 board. Burke & Burke had one prototype but didn't receive enough orders for that production. Michael Brandt says, I have a C2C bus 6-slot. Darren Grant says, different people have different ideas about what makes a CoCo, which I think we're going to definitely delve into that more. So, yeah, sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's fine. And that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Is, what does it make it for you, okay? You get that in the classic car restorations,
Mm-hmm.
Some guys will restore it minimally, and then you have they call it the salon restores, that they spend a huge amount of body, it's took down, everything's took apart, and essentially rebuilt, and somebody with way too much money and time on their hand is restoring the car, and they look fantastic. They look like they come out of the showroom floor.
Mm-hmm.
And, kind of each to its own on those things. And so it's really hard to where to draw the line. And to me, and I have to pick on you, Steve. You talked about 3 voices, but actually,
3 voices with a sound channel.
Well, there's actually 6 available right now.
Well, I draw the line at 3, so that's too far.
Okay, well, you can't get to. And actually, Jim posted something talking about possibly having 12 on the card.
Wow, I'm just gonna put my hand over one of my ears so I can hear just the.
So there's a lot of exciting things, and you know, and I'm mentioning Jim, but Zipster has a card too, and I have a prototype here, and I need to get with Zipster and get the programming details on that so I can start writing code to support it. And so, a lot of exciting things done. But, a lot of them, they're realizing this is a CoCo. All right, we had this, okay. And the CoCo STC, floppy disk controllers are getting hard to find. So, hey, this emulates it looks like it. So, hey, it's good. And if you don't like any of that, that's fine. We've got room in the community enough for the purists, the super purists, and those who want to go the other direction. And
right.
But there's another problem.
Who's talking now?
Oh, it's me, Richard.
Richard, go ahead, Richard.
Okay, yeah. On the floppy controller, the other problem that you have is the mediums themselves is very hard to find, and also the drives are extremely difficult to repair now. You can't find alignment discs. You can't even find some of the parts to make them work now. So that's the other reason you could use like the STC card.
Exactly, and this is if you want to keep the hobby alive, get the interest up, and hopefully I'm doing my part, turning some hardware on, generating some games, and encouraging other people to do the same. As I look at Rick, and I see Bruce there, and so I welcome those people doing it. I know Hugo has a fantastic project in the works. So if we want to be the super purists, we wouldn't do any new software. We'd just use what was there, and just be the collector and not do anything more than what we did back then.
Right.
I'm
getting people saying they're getting a lot of stalling right now on the YouTube stream, and I'm seeing it now on both of my screens. For those of you who don't need video, do you guys mind closing your video? That might help us with a little bandwidth. Just click off on the camera.
And since I'm talking, I'll leave mine on for a moment, and then I'll do that. But so you've got a lot of things going on in the CoCo community, and that's really fantastic and great. We've got some people that are really helpful in promoting the community and doing things, and that's great. Our hosts here, Steve and Curtis, are 2 of those. The CoCo crew, and what they're doing for the community, and everybody else is doing things. Eric Graveluk and Greg Miller, going and doing that new core. Fantastic stuff from guys who were in the community way back in the day. And it's actually getting new people interested in things. Our ham radio group, I have 2 guys that were actually back in the day members of the local color computer club. And Greg Miller was actually in that same club. He actually lived in Grand Ledge, Michigan, which is just maybe 12 miles from where I live at right now. And the guys are looking, they're doing that.
Do me a favor, John, go ahead and close your video too. We're still getting a lot of buffering here. I might have to end the stream and restart the stream too.
Close my video.
All right, we're getting a ton of buffering here as I'm watching this on my laptop and my other computer. All right.
Okay, does that help any?
We'll find out here in just a second. Again, the stream is a few seconds behind.
Okay, so I was actually able to show a former CoCo user where to find the new emulator. and so on. Had a group for a ham radio group. So I think this is exciting times for the CoCo community. And,
Could not agree more. Could not agree more.
And so I think I covered the hardware, things that happen. I don't know anything really stupid I did with the CoCo. I know something that was quite annoying happening. The relays in my original CoCo 1 was under-designed and would keep blowing. They were took back and repaired several times by Radio Shack. And so a lot of things there. And so I guess I've dominated long enough on the conversation.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they use those relays. They use the same ones in the Model 3 as well. I had to replace a few of those.
Yeah. They probably worked if you had just Radio Shack's cassette, and I didn't. And so anything that pulled a little bit more than the standard Radio Shack. And I did notice one of the times when replacing it, they put a diode on it, so they'd probably get a high voltage feedback across things and causing problems too. They didn't account for. But
now the only time that when we're talking about modding, and I'll give you an example where I'm kind of against it, is Steve had sold me a CoCo 1 this past week, and when I opened it up, I realized it was a revision C board, and it has an old Motorola. It has the internal numbering, and it doesn't have 6809. It has the internal Motorola numbering for the CPU, and when my first thought was to modify it to its full potential to 64K and put a 6309 and kind of soup it up. But reading some of the material, I found out it's an extremely rare CoCo, so I'm just going to leave it exactly the way it is. I'm just going to clean it up a little bit, but I'm just going to use it for display purposes and, show it off, power it up and things like that, but I'm not going to modify that one at all.
And I totally understand that, okay? And I wish I had some of the stuff that I had years ago that was just odd boards and stuff that we got off of the Tandy warehouse outlet that was in Groveport, Ohio. We had a bunch of unusually modified CoCo boards, just the motherboards. Those got lost in the period of time with moves and things like that.
Yeah, they had a flea market in Dallas. They used to sell a lot of surplus national parts stuff from the Fort Worth warehouse, or the main warehouse for Tandy. And we got a lot of strange and one-of-a-kind stuff as well.
Yeah, so the same kind of thing, but it was at their warehouse in Groveport, Ohio. They had an outlet store we'd go over and hit. And so, kind of a lot of cool things there. There's times you look at something, no, we don't want to mod this. Okay. Oh, well, let's again, back to my car, don't mod a Kaiser Darren. Don't mod a Hudson limousine. They're too rare. So there's a lot of really kind of cool things going on. And guys, keep it coming. I welcome, all the game developments happening. And I just hope I've been in part inspired some people to do some of these things. And to the gentleman from England, 6809 programming, 6309, way to go. Keep it up.
Very nice, very nice, very nice.
Yeah,
all right.
I'll yield the floor.
Okay. So we do have a question, Richard, from you. And how is your SCART project coming along?
Oh, it's going along just fine. I had taken the design. It was from Barry Nelson's off of his site. And I'd been playing around with it. I was going to try to combine the composite signal and use the horizontal and vertical signal, because I was trying to reduce the amount of external cables. Didn't really quite work around that. I mean, I haven't really tried that part. But the only mod that I had to do is, I know some people were complaining about the first three characters not showing up like in the 80 column mode, and what I took voltages off of what they call the video blanking, which is a voltage that determines whether the signal should be done in composite or RGB mode. And that's where I think where the problem is happening, because Barry's design has it for 100 ohms for a 5-volt source, and when I hooked it up to a USB, it came up to 3.7 volts. And the signal is looking for a voltage between 1 and 3 volts, and so I put a 200 ohm resistor in mine, and it dropped it down to about 1.5 volts. So, and it looks perfect. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is, and I'm sending one to Bruce to be like an external tester to see if it works in the real world before I
that's cool.
send it out.
Yeah, it's
Barry just joined us.
Hey, yeah.
Hey, welcome, Barry.
Yeah, and Bruce, the Canadian labor tester here.
China was produced in. On my copy of the S-cart to HDMI, whoever produced it, the input impedance is actually what it's supposed to be, which is 75 ohms on that pin. So if you put a 100 ohm resistor with a 5-volt supply, you get about 2 some odd volts, 2-3 volts on the pin. Okay, yours, I guess that input impedance is a little bit higher. So yeah, you're going to need to. The thing is, for a bulk cable of some sort, you might want to have some sort of a variable resistor there to tune it for the converter that's being plugged into.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was kind of thinking of, because I'm using the same exact converter that you have listed in your page, and of course some people are going to use different ones. I mean, this one that you have listed, I mean, it's just one of those basic entry-level converter boxes, but and there's some that you can buy for $300-400, but yeah, that's something I probably, I don't like doing variable resistors, but it's, something you're probably going to have to do.
Actually, I got a better idea. How about a voltage divider on, a voltage divider on the 5-volt source side to divide it down to the correct voltage, then with an emitter follower to follow that, that voltage with a, NPN transistor to follow it. Act as a voltage regulator.
Ah, yes, that would be a good idea. I just have to see if I can compact it enough to where it won't be getting in the way or having more cables. Again, that was the whole idea. I was just trying to get it reduced. That's like I said in the beginning, was that composite, using the composite signal is a great idea, but I was just going to try to eliminate that and just use the horizontal and vertical sync signal, and I haven't gotten around to checking that, playing around with that part.
It will work, but the problem is you're going to lose the capability if you switch off that 2-volt signal on the one pin. On mine, it happily switches over to a composite device.
Right.
So you don't have to unplug or plug things or have an external switch. Which is sort of a nice feature to have. So if you do get a good enough sync feed from the composite, there's definite advantages to just leaving it that way, because then you don't have to switch monitors or switch back and forth between cables or have an external video switch to switch from. You just remove that 2-volt signal, and it goes poof, and it drops into composite mode.
Right. Yeah. And also where the RGB cable comes out and where I have to plug the composite, it's not that big of a deal, because it's just a very short cable, so it's not it's not a deal breaker for me to keep that on there.
All right. Well, I think what you're talking about there, you guys are talking about a cable, and this is for a CoCo 3 specifically, right? Because the CoCo 3 has RGB output.
Correct.
Yep.
And so this is well, I'll call it a contraption, but it's something that takes the normal CoCo 3 RGB, and then what does it do? Go from VGA to SCART to HDMI or something along those lines?
No, well, okay. It's an external commercially produced converter.
Ah, okay.
That is readily available. There's numbers of them. Different companies make them they're available on eBay, they're available on Amazon. And the commercially converter takes a SCART plug with a SCART signal format and converts it to HDMI. So that's fine. So now you've got a SCART input from this converter. And these converters are cheap because they are mass produced, which is the nice thing about this.
Right.
I mean, we're talking like $25 for one of these things, okay? Now you take this cable and you build this cable, and this cable hooks up to the CoCo 3's RGB pin out on the CoCo 3, and it hooks up to the composite, and it feeds these signals plus about a 2-volt signal for a switching signal to a pin on the SCART connector. So the cable that hooks to the CoCo is basically just a plug adapter that adapts the CoCo's plugs to an SCART pin format, so it can plug into an SCART input. And it just so happens, luckily for us, coincidentally, that the signal output and voltage levels on the color computer's video is completely 100% in line and compatible with the SCART signal format that it's expecting. It is, the CoCo is outputting exactly the levels, etc., that you would expect to see on an SCART plug receiving an NTSC video signal.
Now, is this cable completely passive, or I'm hearing you guys talking about putting in resistance and things like that? Is there something else that has to go in line with this cable?
The cable itself is completely passive. There's one pin on the SCART that needs to have a signal level about 2.5 volts. The spec for SCART says 2 to 3 volts. And that signal is switched on and off depending on the mode you're using SCART in. With the signal on, the SCART is in RGB mode.
Okay.
And gets its color input from the RGB pins from the 10-pin plug on the bottom of the color computer. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. With the signal switched off, the SCART expects a composite video signal on one of its other pins, which otherwise it uses that composite signal just for sync.
Okay.
So what we were talking about doing is making sure on my adapter that I use with my SCART device, all I have going to that 2 to 3 volt pin for switching is I have a 5-volt power supply, and I just have a 100 ohm resistor. The SCART specification, which apparently mine adheres to, but this other gentleman's and some others I'm learning apparently do not, says that the input impedance on all the pins their input pins are supposed to be 75 ohms. So if you take a 100 ohm resistor and apply it to a 5-volt signal, you get about a 2 volts signal on the pin. Okay? Does the voltage drop across the 100 ohm? It reduces your 5 volts to about 2 point something volts going into this pin, which is exactly what the SCART wants. So I just have a passive 100 ohm resistor in line with a 5 volt USB power supply. But what he was saying was with his SCART converter device, which is apparently a similar device to the one he got, but apparently maybe from a different production run or a different supplier, who knows, or maybe from a different part of China, I don't know. But his apparently has a slightly different input impedance. So we were discussing how to keep that 2-volt signal at 2 volts. And probably the best way to do that is with a very, very, very simple voltage regulator.
Well, I think it's a great segue to get back to the discussion of CoCo hardware, because what you guys are doing and talking about, and what, for example, what Brendan Donahue is doing as well, is it's kind of addressing a need where it's not as much about modifying or, pardon my French here, bastardizing a CoCo. It's more about trying to adapt or retrofit a retro machine to modern displays, because the ability to connect a color computer to a modern television is less than elegant. The picture is less than pristine, et cetera, et cetera. So some of these hardware devices...
I give you a backstory on the SCART cable. That was very popular in Europe back in the 80s and 90s. And like Barry is mentioning, the output is almost totally compatible. The SCART specs are almost compatible with the RGB with the CoCo 3. The reason it's popular now is you have other consoles. There's the Sega Genesis, the NES, and several others that also use an RGB output analog one. And so a lot of people have discovered, well, the SCART cable or the SCART specs, you can convert that into HDMI, and that's why that converter is mass-produced and is very inexpensive. And so that's basically what we're doing. So we don't have to create our own hardware to convert it into HDMI.
Right. And then what I was saying, he was saying about the necessity for this, I was like, if it's even possible without some device like this to hook up to some TVs, because some TVs don't have, at this point, I'm understanding they're dropping the RF tuning functionality off of some of the TV sets for the analog channels.
That's gonna make connecting a retro system less likely in the future.
Yes, and he's right, because there's some TVs that I've hooked up my CoCo 3 on the composite. It doesn't work at all because it's missing the.
I had the same problem trying to capture CoCos and CoCos 3s. Okay, so Darren Grant was here, and Darren Grant said I was very interested. Darren Grant, by the way, is Mr. Tandy from the UK. I don't know if you heard the podcast, or he's running Tandy UK right now. Darren was here, and he says he has to go, but he was interested in getting in on the hardware discussion, or at least listening to the hardware discussion as far as the future of Tandy hardware as well. Thanks for being here, Darren. So sorry you have to run. So I think what these things are doing is they're addressing a need for connectivity. And so, and although I don't understand hardware and I don't make hardware, I understand a little bit about software. And so when you're making software, you're going to say to yourself, okay, I want to set out to make a program to do A, B, and C. Now, along the way, you're going to probably discover I can also do D and E. Or when you're done, you're going to go back and say, okay, well, I did A, B, and C, but now let's see if I can add this or tweak that. So I can understand doing that in software. I would imagine to somebody who's a hardware craftsman that the similar things happen where, because when we look at this VGA project from CoCo Fest 25 to CoCo Fest 26, it's come a long way. It started off as basically a way to get the CoCo to output VGA. And talking about VGA is already becoming a dated technology where modern TVs are less likely to have VGA inputs as well. So even though we're converting to VGA, which is better than the traditional standards, you still have the issue of VGA is going to become, obsolete at some point in time. But the point is, we're trying to say, okay, well, let's find a way to connect to a better display. Okay, I've done that. I've got VGA output. Okay, well, now what else can I do? Can I enable artifacting? Can I enable this? Can I enable that? Now that I've done that, how about more colors? How about more modes? It's almost like an exercise in what else can I do? And I don't see anything wrong with that. You're adding features to basically a utility, to a hardware utility. And as much as those features are nice, unless you know how to take advantage of them, they're not going to distract from your color computer anyway. So, your CoCo is going to look like a CoCo unless you turn on one of these modes and activate the alternate color sets and alternate, font modes and things like that. So, for myself, I don't look at that as a bastardization to the platform. I look at it as a nice enhancement or augmentation. I don't know. For me, VGA is not even something I'm interested in personally, because if I'm going to hook up a CoCo to something, I need to be able to capture it as well, or I would like to be able to capture it. And my options for capturing are basically composite, S-video. I can do HDMI, but my HDMI right now has a 2-second delay, so HDMI is not even appealing to me. So I am personally only interested in things that I can do a live capture on and run through my PC. So for me, composite and S-video are getting the job done. But one of the things that Richard mentioned too is that these composite outputs and these RF outputs, even them, they're kind of non-standard. So when you plug a CoCo 3 composite into, for example, a flat panel TV, you probably won't see it. But you plug it into a CRT, you will, and it has to do with how they output the signal. I had to go through a lot of iterations of hardware capture devices until I could find one that I could capture. I have one device that I use to capture RF and composite, and I've got a different device I use to capture S-video. Just luck of the draw finding things that would sync to the proper timings and signalings properly too. So there's a lot of challenges in trying to run an old machine with modern displays, and I don't think it's a bad thing that we're trying to address those things. So if you're a person who says, I don't want to touch that classic car, you can keep your CoCo stock. You can hopefully still find an old CRT television, hook it up to that. That will work. But we're running up against a wall where there's going to be parts we can't replace, like the gimme. We can't get new gimme. So I'm looking forward to the new gimme chip.
We might be able to, because there's people working on it.
Well, that's what I mean. Ed Snyder's gimme, but we can't buy replacement gimmies in the wild. It's not a part you can order like you can order a processor or things like that. So there are things that need to be replaced because there is no natural resource anymore. And so as this new gimme is going to be developed, again, you're going to say to yourself, now that I've accomplished A, B, and C, why not add D and E? Why not? And it's a feature you can choose to take advantage of, or you can choose to not take advantage of it. Floppy drives, if Curtis is mentioning, floppy drives are becoming harder to get, and the floppy disks themselves are not reliable media over time. So the CoCo SDC and the virtual floppy disk is, I look at that as a natural extension to the CoCo, because when I first started buying CoCos on eBay, the last thing I was going to say to myself is, I'm going to go out and get a whole bunch of floppy disks, right? Or I'm going to buy every ROM pack for every game I want to play. No, it's just not practical. It's not sane. It's not practical, and you can't afford it. So to be able to have this stuff virtual is a godsend. And none of my CoCos are modded other than my CoCo 3, and it was pre-modded. So it has a 6309 and it has the 512K, but those aren't really abominations, Those are still kind of in line with period accurate devices and stuff, Yeah,
so to put it in the terms of a classic car, I mean, you have your classic car there, and it's sitting in your driveway. It's like moving into the future. Okay, well, now everybody is using flying cars and not repairing the roadways anymore, and the roadways aren't usable. So you either fix the roadway or do something, in the terms of CoCo 3, you fix your monitor so it'll work with you, or you have nothing to use it with.
Yeah. Or you retrofit your old car to make it fly.
Right, something.
Yeah. So I thought it was a really interesting discussion. I'm going to pull it up on the screen here. I want to see what some other people chimed in with. So here was the original post right now, and it was from Cutter McGinnis. And he basically said, it pains me to read about folks who want to trick the CoCo out, appreciate what it was and what it did and what it had. The economy of resources and code performed wonderful things without anything added. Appreciate what it was, not what it could be morphed into. The digital world was made is fascinating all by itself. Now call me a purist, and that's okay with me. Sometimes a 57 Chevy should remain stock. And I think we've addressed a lot of these things already, but there's been a ton of comments, and I think it was a great topic, right? So and we did say that, a lot of talented people are making hardware, and they're giving their times and skills to push boundaries, and it's their hobby, so they should be able to, and they are, you know what I mean? So a lot of people chiming in here.
It moves the platform into the future.
Yeah.
And if it's still compatible with all the original software, and is able to run all the original software, then you have all of that history and whatnot is now available for somebody to look at, see, experience, etc.
Right. So a lot of people saying I'm in favor of preserving it. We got some people coming in here. Mike Brandt saying, I've got a stock CoCo 3, but he plans on upgrading to a 6309 and keeping the others stock. Here's Eric Gavriluk. I've been beating a drum about a new motherboard, ship in an anti-static bag, couple of screws, swap it out, and put the original in bag for safekeeping, and then hack away. That's actually a pretty cool idea, right? Because that's another challenge, too, is when you try to create new hardware, we've got to fit it into the space of what's available in the case and what's not going to, protrude out to other doohickeys that are on the system board. So there are physical challenges and space limitations as well as some of the hardware. So come up with a whole new motherboard design and put it in your CoCo, and then add whatever kind of crap you want to it. I mean, if you're going to do that, make a bus, right? So make like a whole nice little bus and put everything on a card and make it all internal. That would be kind of cool, right? So
if you're going to do that, please rebuild the keyboard. I desperately would love to see. I've got a CoCo 3 sitting in my closet, but the keyboard Mylar is dead.
Right.
And I've had a couple of attempts so far. I'm sure I'll get it working eventually with old, rear window defogger repair trick.
Right.
I would love to have, a new keyboard to just drop in there. So.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people chiming in on this, on the pros and cons of that. Even Ed Snyder, the guy who's making a lot of this new hardware, says, I appreciate the nostalgia sentiment for sure. The great thing about a hobby and a group like this is that you can approach it in whichever way you'd like. There's a broad spectrum of activities to enjoy with these machines today. If you want to be a purist, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing wrong with using new technology to add features. I find the melding of the old and new technology has a kind of magic all to its own. I like that phrase there, the melding of technology.
My CoCo is actually stock. It just has a very odd video cable.
Yeah. True. So, yeah, a lot of people chiming in on that. I thought that was a cool topic. I don't think there is like a lot of things in the hobby. There's not really a right or wrong. It's just what do you want from it? Anybody who's not into retro could look at any of us and think we're all crazy. And for me, the CoCo has always been and will always be about entertainment. I play games on it. I am interested in learning about OS 9 because I think it's interesting, but I'll probably never use it. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to judge somebody who wants to use a 35-year-old operating system because I'm playing 35-year-old games. Who am I to judge? But what I want to do is right for me. Doesn't mean I'm right and everybody else is wrong. There's so many of us who have so many different interests in hardware and software and operating systems and games or applications. I just think it's such a fertile landscape that everybody here can plant their own and sow their own crops and do whatever the hell they want, or not for that matter, or starve for all I care.
Hey, Stevie.
Yeah.
James, OS 9, try Sub Simulator.
Yeah.
Or Microscopic Mission.
Yeah, I'll get to them.
those are great games, and they run under the OS 9 OS.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Interbank incident.
Yes, I like the interbank incident. I just realized my phone.
Yeah, me too. Yay.
King's Quests.
Yeah, those are classics. Yeah, when it comes to adventures.
I find the King's Quest on the CoCo run a little slow for my liking. I play those on the Tandy. So for me, my personal memories of the King's Quest series are Tandy 1003 voice music, slightly faster speed. So it's hard for me to play in anything less than that.
I also think I found one of the original developers for the Interbank incident. I haven't contacted him yet.
Oh, that would be great. Would love to speak to them. Carmen Sandiego, Alexander Wallace from Mexico. Viva Mexico. We got people from all around the world. We had UK here earlier. We've got Canada. We've got Australia. We got America. We got all kinds of stuff. Another great topic that came up on the Facebook page, I want to find that too, was the one where they said, what's like your most embarrassing moment of owning a color computer? Of course, now I need to find it. Here we go. Richard Kelly posted this one here, and he said, Here he gives some examples. The chip on my CoCo fried after I tried to do a poke. I had 64K instead of 32K, and I didn't even know it. It's a common story for home computer users to learn something that makes them feel like dumbbells, but then they feel less stupid when they find out about countless users who are just as misguided as them. So feel free to post any CoCo experiences you had where you first felt like an idiot for a CoCo-related mistake, but then you felt better when you found out other CoCo users made the same goof. And here's my goof. I kept pressing the reset button over and over again, trying to make the screen red, not knowing it was in fact supposed to be orange on colored televisions. Oh, because the screen says if the screen is red, if the screen is not red, press reset. So I guess he kept hitting reset, looking for a real red when it's actually orange. Yeah, you'd be pressing a long time looking for real red there, right? So, I mean, there was just a lot of great replies, right? So one of them says, a friend and I were taking turns typing in a long basic program on my 64K CoCo. As he typed the last line, he leaned back and yanked the plug out of the wall before he saved the program to cassette. That was a valuable lesson, right? Yeah, I think a lot of us learned back then when you're working on something, save and save often. I think Rick Adams is probably the classic adventure, the classic example of that when he tells his story of saving onto 3 different cassettes with his power supply overheating, spraying Freon on it.
I used to have in an older Apple II manual. I can't find it in the current copy that I currently have with my Apple II. But in an older manual, I distinctly remember reading 2 definitions for the in the gloss for text window. And the first definition said, text window, what you jump out of after you've typed in your program for 4 hours and the power goes out.
Right.
That is so wrong.
Dan Loyal said, I was upgrading the memory in my first CoCo 3. I cut both legs to remove the capacitors. I scratched the trace on the motherboard and the machine would no longer boot. It seems like it's safer to only cut one leg and leave the capacitors attached. Now I have an extra machine for spare parts. Mike Craig says you could actually just follow the trace back and put a solder jumper on there. I mentioned I was working on a very large demo one point in time and lost power. The computer froze and had never saved it once, and so that was kind of mine. I also mentioned too, like before I got my first CoCo, I used to always like walk up to like a TI computer in the store, and I didn't know the basic language, so I just typed plain English. I'm like, begin programming. Program, please. Hello, computer. You know, are you ready to program? And I just used to type stuff like that into the basic prompt, not knowing what the syntax was. You know. A lot of people chiming in on that. So for those of us here in the panel right now, do we have embarrassing stories and things we did that we learned valuable lessons from?
There's a friend of mine I could tell you a story about. I won't give his name because it's embarrassing, but he was hooking up a hard drive to a color computer, and I was helping him with the hardware and the software, getting the hard drive up and running. And he had the hard drive upside down so he could access the jumpers. Okay, and this was one of the old big full height 5 1/4 inch wide hard drives. So he had the hard drive upside down so he could access the jumpers and set the jumpers appropriately. I didn't think anything of it at the time. So, and then as I'm sitting here watching, he's got it all hooked up, and he starts reaching for the power switch to flip the drive on. And as he's saying that, and it felt like slow motion, I said, no! Because the old hard drives, if you had them upside down and you powered them up, it would crash the heads.
Oh my God. Wow.
So on his brand new hard drive that he had just hooked, he crashed the heads on the drive.
Wow. I wonder if that's something you could quickly take back and replace and call it an out-of-box failure or something. Yeah.
I think that's what he did with it, but still.
Yeah. Alexander Wallace said the first.
I felt like I was moving in slow motion. I was trying to.
Yeah, you can kind of see it happening.
Would back off before the drive spun all the way up, but I didn't make it.
Yeah, you can see it happening. Alexander says the first time I opened mine, I closed it with the long screws where the short ones should go. So he put the long screws in a short screw socket, and then he made bumps in the cases by just using the wrong screws. I could see that happening.
I did that.
I did that with one of my CoCo 2s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that before.
Yeah, I it just reminds me of a great scene from a movie in the original Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie. The guy's taking apart a clock and he's putting little screws everywhere and he's making a note on which screw is in which quadrant of his little screw map, and she takes a hammer and just smashes the thing open. He's like, "You messed up my system." But yeah, sometimes when I take apart laptops, I will put the screws out in the order in which I took them out of the laptop off to the side in case they're different length screws and stuff. So hopefully some of us come up with systems. But, you know, that's it. Hopefully when you have these lessons in life, you learn from them and you hopefully avoid, you know, if we don't learn from the past, you know, we're doomed to repeat it, right? So hopefully a lot of these lessons that happen to us, we will learn from and you know, not make those mistakes again. My biggest lesson was, I always remember, is I save and save often. That's true if I'm working on a Word document or a spreadsheet or a program or anything else. I'm going to save continuously so I don't lose it. Well, I think let me. Anybody else want to chime in on the embarrassing stories, or I'll switch to another topic. I was going to pull up the Tandy Assembly website for just a second.
I don't have a CoCo one because I wasn't into CoCo back in the day, but I did blow up the disk drive on my Apple II. The original drives, they were a 20-pin dual inline header, and if you got them off by one pin, it would blow things up.
Ah, man, that's terrible.
It's repairable, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did something kind of crazy. I was at the club meeting one time, and it was being held at a library in one of their little conference rooms off on the side. And I was working on something, trying to unplug one of the floppy drives, and the drive's power cabinet was still on. And the screwdriver slipped and hit the power supply terminal and shut off the power in half the library.
Don't you hate it when that happens?
You're lucky to be alive.
They don't know where the fuse box is.
Yeah, right.
I did a pretty good April Fool's joke on a library and a computer room at a local college back in the day. I'm pretty good at programming, and at the time I was programming on some Apple II stuff. And so what I had done is I took and I intercepted in RAM, because all these machines had, you know, the 64, they had the 16K language cards. So you could copy just like we do on our CoCos, you could copy the ROM into RAM and modify it. So I modified the text and screen hooks so that when it wrote in text mode, instead of being in text mode, it would actually be in graphics mode, and it would draw graphics characters on the screen.
Ah, neat.
And then I modified the routines so it was using my font with the letters being upside down, reversed. And I changed the way that it printed to the screen memory so it went from the bottom of the screen to the top. Okay? So when you boot up, and it's a modified operating system disk, it looks like it's just booting up the operating system. But as soon as it boots up, the screen flips over and everything is upside down. So
wow.
I stuck these into the drives on the Apple II in the lab on all the Apple IIs. And then I went around, and just to complete it, I flipped the monitors upside down on top of the computer, so the feet are sticking up in the air. And I booted the machines up, and I walked away and sat back and watched.
Wow, that's an elaborate hoax. Bill, you still on the call?
I can share one of the dumbest repair stories I had.
Hold that thought, Richard. I want to relay something to Bill. I don't know if you're watching the text chat as well, Bill, but Curtis says, Bill, could you mention a few, like coming over to fix my CoCo and discovering that I had forgotten to plug in the multi-pack into the wall, and that's the only reason why my disk controller wasn't working?
I was going to mention that, but I didn't want to invade on Curtis.
Well, he just offered it up. So yeah.
I'm just not a hardware guy.
I'm sorry, Richard. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, one of the most unusual and dumbest repairs I've ever did was a Model 2. The customer called me in, or I was dispatched, and it was in an office building, and I go in there, and the only problem was with this Model 2, it was worn out. The keyboard, you know how you rest your palms, and it's worn out, and the screen and stuff, it showed its wear. The screen wasn't burned in or anything, but it was all scratched up, and I just said, what do you want me to do? She goes, I want you to clean it up, and make it like what R2-D2 was in Star Wars at the end of the movie. And that's what she wanted me to do. She just wanted me to replace all the case parts and stuff. But just mentioning R2-D2 is like, it's not going to do anything, change anything for it.
But I guess I can somewhat relate, though. I guess you basically wanted her case and whatnot restored to, new condition.
The madman has joined us.
Hello, guys.
All right. Hopefully we won't lose our bandwidth again. Curtis says he also he soldered his hair while deep in thought. Trying to scratch your head with a soldering iron doesn't sound like a hot poker.
He was talking about electric shocks as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember soldering something where I didn't disconnect it from the power, and I put my arm down.
Ooh,
ouch.
And I threw the soldering iron across the room.
Ouch.
That's 220 volts instead of 110.
Wow, yeah. That's twice the jolt, huh?
Yeah. But all good. I'm still alive.
That's because in Europe everything's on the metric system, right?
Yeah.
You can get to double it and add 30.
Yeah, it's almost as bad as me, Nick, where I actually grabbed the soldering iron by the wrong end.
Ouch. That'll get you.
It's a nice yellow mark and a very distinct porky smell.
Yes.
Is that why you're calling now?
What happened, Barry? What did you just say?
Slightly curly now?
Oh, he says your hair is slightly curly now from the electric shock. You look like Don King.
No, mate, it's like...
Yeah. All right. I'm going to switch over for just a second to the Tandy Assembly website, which is hopefully our next big event that as many of us show up to as possible. One of the things that John Linville just recently added was a blog to Tandy Assembly. And so he was talking about kind of the genesis and the catalyst of creating Tandy Assembly, where it started off as kind of a bit of a pipe dream. He was on the halfway point on his journey to CoCo Fest. He came across the town called Chillicothe, Ohio, saw the hotel there and says, this is a great place to have a retro festival. And so kind of came up with the idea of let's do a Tandy Assembly. And so for those of you who are not aware of Tandy Assembly, it's kind of like a CoCo Fest, but it's not just focused on the color computer. It's focused on all Tandy computers, and it is this year is going to be the first one ever. So this is the inaugural Tandy Assembly. It's going to be taking place October. And I don't know if I can go back now on this thing here because this is not a real browser. I'm not sure that I can go back. So let me see if I can just switch pages again. Now we're back to Tandy Assembly, right? So it's taking place October, and it's in Chillicothe, Ohio, October 7th and October 8th. And let's go back to that schedule for just a second. Right now we still have Don French as our keynote address on Saturday, telling the TRS story. And then Sunday, our speaker is Scott Adams of the Great Adventure International. Is he Adventure International? Is that right? Did I get that right? Scott Adams, what company did he work for with all his adventure games? Anyone?
Scott Adams International.
Scott Adams International. It wasn't Adventures International? Okay. Well, they've got two good keynote speakers already lined up, and we're still 6 months out, so there'll be more to be determined. And there's a blog now available here as well. And so the blog is basically talking about how we're going to be bringing in the TRS-80 Trash Talk is going to be here. CoCo Crew is going to be promoting this as well. So it should be good. I'm definitely going to try to make Tandy Assembly. I think there's a couple of nice things about this is that it is a kind of mid-year CoCo Fest. So instead of having to wait once a year to CoCo Fest, we've talked about this for those of us who have been. After a period of time, you get the CoCo Fest blues because you miss that connection with your fellow CoCo nuts. So instead of having to wait a year to get together and geek out again, now you only have to wait 6 months, and so it feeds that human component. And it's also a little bit broader spectrum now, where it is Tandy 1000, Model 1s, Model 2s, Model 3s. So it's going to cater to the Z80s and the Intel processors, as well as the Motorola processors, pocket computers. Anything Tandy will be celebrated. So hopefully there's a little bit more broader appeal and maybe more interest and maybe some more attendance even. It's too soon to tell. It's the first event. But I think the CoCo Crew podcast did a great job promoting CoCo Fest. They're definitely the reason why I went to CoCo Fest. So if we have the CoCo Crew podcast behind this, we also have Trash Talk podcast behind us and the Floppy Days podcast behind this as well. We now have 3 podcasts promoting a new vintage computing event. Hopefully the turnout will be good. I'm definitely going to try to attend. And I'm hoping a lot of other people will as well. And it'll be nice to see this one be a success and this become another annual thing. There's so many vintage computer festivals. The good news is there's no shortage of geek outs to go to. The bad news is nobody has the time and money to go to them all. That's my biggest challenge. So if I have to pick some that I know I'm going to enjoy, I'm definitely going to enjoy Tandy-based events, for sure. So to find some brethren and sistren to chat with. So, yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. So that was our first blog. I'm sure they'll be blogging more as more information becomes available. I know they're going to now start some planning meetings. And so I'm sure as more information comes out of those planning meetings, we'll have more to share on Tandy Assembly. And just based on who's in the call right now, how many people think they might be able to attend Tandy Assembly? I'm definitely going to try.
I would like to.
I'm going to try as well.
Yeah. I don't know if Michael Brandt's still watching, but Michael Brandt, who's in Florida too, we actually talked about maybe carpooling, and I know we've mentioned that before too in the Facebook group, maybe get a Florida contingent, to carpool to CoCo Fest, or other points unknown. So it might be interesting to do a little road trip and, have a little buddy picture. Steve and Mike go to Ohio, dude, where's my car or something like that. So kind of like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, so might be interesting. So
I'm wondering if they'll let me into the country.
I think your pictures are up in all the TSA places. Do not let the madman in. Yeah.
I would sort of like to attend this, but I'm unfortunately going to be, my budget is going to be spent for travel because I want to go to is a total solar eclipse that's coming across the country. And I'm somewhat into astronomy too, so I'm going to be going to see that.
Oh, that's cool. There's it's you have to pick your poison each year and where you're going to spend your extracurricular funds. Hey Simon, do you mind turning off your camera because we've been having some bandwidth issues. I want to make sure that they don't come back.
No worries.
Because Barry started to chop up for just a second. It could have just been a coincidence, but I'm not sure. And Hugo has just joined us. Bonjour, Hugo.
Bonjour.
Yeah, and actually the one thing we haven't really spoken about yet, now that Hugo's here, maybe we can touch on it, is one of the topics I wanted to touch base on too, but I want to save for a better visual demonstration. But the compiled sprites was a big topic this week on the CoCo mailing list as well. So I don't know how technical we can get into the discussion. So maybe we can do a simple high-level discussion on what that is. And then I would love to schedule something where we can actually demonstrate it and do a formal presentation on how to do sprites on a CoCo and different examples of non-compiled versus compiled, pros and cons, how to spot them and things like that, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how deep we can go into that topic today because currently my code is broken. I'm rewriting my sprite compiler. I've had some feedback from a few persons, and they suggested some interesting things, and I think I can make the code even faster. Maybe
was that Glenn Hewlett who sent that to you?
Yes, Glenn, and also Paul Thayer and Simon Jonasson. So they all suggested very interesting things. So I will give it a try. Now, Glenn is porting the arcade Pac-Man game to the CoCo, if I understand well. I don't know how he's making this conversion. I don't know what's his approach. That would be a nice subject for another discussion. But I know he's not doing transparency at the pixel level. He's doing it at the byte level.
Okay.
Yes. If you want a part of your sprite to be transparent, to show the background, then you have limitations because on the CoCo, in the 16 color mode, you have 2 pixels per byte. So you can't have, for example, pixel number 3 transparent and pixel number 2 opaque or colored. That wouldn't work. You would need both pixels to be transparent. That's how it works. Now, the way I'm doing it, I'm giving the developers the choice to have transparency at the pixel level, which means pixel number 2 can be colored and pixel number 3 can be transparent, for example. Now, it takes more CPU, more calculations, but it can still be optimized quite a lot, actually, and give you some very nice performance. So now I'm rewriting my code to so that it is more efficient, but I still keep transparency at the pixel level. I know most developers won't do that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Donkey Kong port has transparency at the byte level. I think the sprites are designed to follow the byte alignment.
Yes, I talked to Sockmaster about this a long time ago, about sprite transparency when we started working on it a couple of years ago. And Sockmaster says to me, well, it's very nice to have pixel level, but it's nowhere near as fast as byte level. Everything in Donkey Kong is byte level transparency.
Yeah. Now, what will be interesting to do, and I think I can work with Glenn on that, will be to compare, once I have updated my code, because he pointed out a few places where my code was really not optimal. So when I have updated my code, we'll be able to compare how large the code generated is and how slower the pixel transparency is compared with byte level transparency. We'll get some pretty good samples, and then we can come back and show the results.
Okay.
And, another thing also, since you have since the CoCo is working with 2 pixels per byte. Right now in my game, characters move when they move horizontally, they jump 2 positions at a time. It makes for a clunky animation, and I expect in the near future, when my compiled sprite code gets smaller, I expect to generate 2 different versions of each sprite, one for odd coordinates and one for even coordinates. So that will be smoother and better looking. But I'm not there yet. But this is something I intend to do. And another thing I was working on this week, I'm not there yet, is to have a foreground, tiles at the foreground level. Now, for example, you have a pillar or a column, and your character walks and is behind the column. Now, the CoCo has no hardware for doing that, so I need to find a way of updating these blocks in a very, very optimal way. And I actually found an algorithm for doing that. Instead of sleeping, I do that kind of things. And so
we have a French madman now too. So
yeah,
he's in cahoots with me.
Attached by the hip with the other Denmark.
Now, my understanding is the CoCo only has one piece of hardware for doing that. It's called a 6809.
Yes.
And you have to use it wisely. So foreground level scenery, it's very ambitious. Very few games are doing that, especially on the CoCo.
Right. So what you're talking about is
I don't want to have any limit on the number of objects you can have on the foreground.
Wow.
For example, you can have a level where it's nice to see the little Donkey Kong very angry on screen.
Yes, well, we're talking about sprites. Yeah. Well, I was going to say it sounds like what you're talking about with the foreground, with now the multi levels. We're talking about multiple planes of hardware now, which I guess some people would call a bit plane. And like in the Sega Genesis and the 16-bit systems, this was called parallaxing, when you had multiple levels of foreground and background scrolling, especially when they scrolled at different speeds. You got very cool three-dimensional effects. Now, all of that was done with hardware-assisted chips that helped doing things. So, just real quick, for anybody who's watching who's maybe not even as technical, I'm just going to do a quick example of what is a sprite, and I just put one on the screen here. I think we can all identify with Donkey Kong here, right? And so, when we talk about a sprite in the 8-bit 2D generation of games, the sprites were the characters on the screen. So Pac-Man was a sprite, Donkey Kong was a sprite, Mario was a sprite. In a true sprite, the system had chips that were dedicated to allow this character to exist in the foreground and not erase the background. So when I move Donkey Kong in front of Mark Overholzer right now, well, Mark is not erased. When I move Donkey Kong in front of David's lad, now David looks a hell of a lot better too, by the way. So when I move Donkey Kong in front of people, that's kind of like a sprite. And so the arcade machines had sprites. The Atari game systems had sprites. TI had sprites. Commodore had sprites. And so it's extra chips that allow you to have a foreground object that does not disrupt the background of the game. The color computer does not have the chips to do this, and so when you create these sprites or these characters on the screen, it's all done with software, it's all done with programming, and the degree to which you can pull this off and make it fast and make it smooth is limited to, number one, the skills of the human being involved, and as far as I can tell, you are all mortal humans. None of you are like demigods or anything, although you pull things off that make me think you are. So part of it's the skill of the programmer, and then part of it's just the absolute finite limitations of the processing power of the system, and how do we balance tricks and optimizations and skills and techniques to achieve in software what other systems could do in hardware. And a lot of people have done incredible jobs on this, and right now what's happening is this is kind of a crowdsourced knowledge sharing where everybody's contributing to this topic and sharing techniques and how to pull this off in assembly language. And I think it's great, and I think that again everybody's going to benefit from this when we have better games in the future, you know.
Yeah. And we had kind of it all started last year. We had some kind of a friendly competition about how to render sprites as fast as possible. And each time someone posted some new code, we thought, wow, I can beat that. And someone actually beat that. And in the end, some guy, I don't remember who, and it's a bit sad, but he came with a compiled sprites, and I knew about compiled sprites, but I always thought it was too complicated for me to understand. I underestimated myself, I guess, and at this point, I was starting to know a bit more and to understand more how assembly language works and how the 6809 has enough registers to perform most complex tasks like that. If you can imagine a way of using this wild beast in the best way possible. And so I took a break in programming for a few months. I guess I completely disappeared from the scene. And when I started programming again, I guess my brain had compiled itself some of the knowledge, because suddenly I found myself able to understand how it works. So basically, to prepare a compiled sprite, you have to read the pixels or the bytes from the original bitmap that are in memory, and then you have two ways you can go. If you want to keep all 16 colors, you need a mask. It's a second bitmap, which is black and white, tells you which bytes or pixels in the first bitmap, the one with all the colors, which bits are transparent and which bits are opaque. And the second way is to say, okay, I can live with 15 colors, and you say, okay, color number 0 means transparent. And that's what most developers will do. They can live with these limitations. So that's what I do. Color number 0 means transparent. So in your drawing tool, you simply draw your sprite, and you choose 0 is any funky color you want to use, like pink, for example. You can design your sprite, your bitmap, and decide which parts are transparent. Now, the compiler, what it does, well, normally, if you want to render that you have a loop, and you can program that in BASIC, I guess. It's a nice exercise. You have something drawn in some part of the screen, and you program a loop to copy the pixels to another part of the screen. So I guess that could be a nice exercise for you, Stevie. And and then you see how slow it is.
Oh yeah, I remember doing that.
You have nested loops, so you have to use multiple variables. You have, for each pixel or each byte, you have to read and make a decision. So you have lots of comparisons to do. And if you're working at the pixel level, then you have to look at the two halves of your byte, the left part and the right part, and decide what to do with each one, and apply, merge it with the background that you read, and so and so. So it's true, it's much slower that way, but if you don't have many holes in your sprite, it's just a few little parts of your sprite that have these complex transparencies. For all the rest, it's really fast.
Right.
So the compiled sprite has no comparison and no loops, no variables to maintain, no branching, nothing. It's all prepared to be rendered in the most obvious and linear way possible. So, for example, one way of doing that, the one that I'm implementing right now, you position your screen pointer at a certain place on the screen, a certain address. And from this point, for example, if your sprite is 16 pixels wide, then you just put on the screen only the pixels that are not transparent. You say first pixel from where I'm pointing will be drawn. The second, the third, you don't even mention it. And you say, okay, the fourth one, I'm going to draw this one. So really, you only have to work for the places where you actually want to display pixels for the sprite. It's very useful, for example, if you want to draw an explosion, which has many transparent parts.
Yeah.
So after drawing only on this line, only the sprites, only the pixels you want to draw, you haven't moved your pointer to the screen yet, because the 6809 allows you to do indexed access from a certain point. And then after you're done with this scanline, you just move your pointer to the next line. You add 152 bytes to your pointer, and you're good to go for the next line. If a line is empty, you can skip it altogether if your process is optimized enough. Now, Nick is asking, what about saving the background? Yeah, before you draw, you need to save the background. On a video game console and on many computers, you have hardware facilities for or functions that automatically save the background when you put a sprite. Now, on the CoCo, you have to do all the work yourself. So for saving the background, I save the background in a buffer. It's just a structure that holds the pixels or the bytes until the next cycle, when I will restore the background so that the sprite doesn't leave a trail when I move it. Restore before you redraw. And for that, there are some fast algorithms. For example, Simon showed me how to use stack blasting, which is an advanced technique. I won't explain it today. It's really black magic. It uses the force, and it's really fast. Nick mentions it adds overhead. That's true. And if you have a black background or a single color background, then you can go without having to do all of this. But for my game, I want to use all the tools, all the functions, all the effects that I can think of and that I can program. So I want color in the background, I want scenery, I want foreground objects, I want collision detection, all this stuff. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to program all these things.
Yeah.
It all running in a game that moves at a decent speed. Because some of the best CoCo games are also a bit clunky, a bit slow, especially the 3D games. You see that moving maybe at 2 frames per second. I don't want to go that way. I still want to have CPU cycles left for the music sound. So this is really a madman project.
This is a job for the madman.
Yeah, CoCo Sprite, the principle is simple, and with that superb CPU that we have in the CoCo, in the indexed mode, you can do marvels, and if you program it right, then you can really skip all the empty parts of your sprite and move right to the next pixel without losing any cycle. So this is it.
Hugo, very good explanation.
Sorry?
So
Hugo,
a compiled sprite, instead of storing the bitmap for the sprite separate from the code, you actually merge. What you're doing is, if I'm understanding, you're merging the bitmap into the code, and then that code has the sprite already built right into it, and then you just call that subroutine to draw the sprite.
Exactly.
Well, in fact, I generate the code to render the sprite. It's like the computer is writing its own code and storing it somewhere in RAM. So I just wrench on this, and it does the work, and it returns.
Wow.
It's really it's like in BASIC you would say you would have a function that says there's the exec function in BASIC that most of you know. You would say exec a certain address. It wouldn't crash a computer and display funky characters or colors. It wouldn't hang. It would just pop a sprite somewhere on the screen, pop a bitmap, and return. It's that magic. And you have you generate a block of code for each sprite. Now this code is larger than the sprite. There's the memory management that becomes very complex. Understanding how the compiler works, that's the simple part. Now organizing it in memory, that's difficult. because the compiled sprites take up much more space, 3 to 4 times the space of the original bitmap that made up the sprite. So if you want to have also the version which is moved by a single pixel, for the odd, even versus odd horizontal coordinates, then you need to have 2 compiled sprites per bitmap. But so you have you end up taking up lots of memory. But the CoCo 3 with 512K can certainly handle that. And all you have to do is make sure that you save your sprites one after the other. They're all of different sizes, obviously, because the code is different for each. So this is the hard part. And I'm using many 8K pages for my compiled sprite. I organized them. I built some code to fill the pages, prevent overflow, skip to the next. And when I want to render them, it loads the proper page in the CPU address space and branches.
Well, speaking of compiled sprites, and Glenn Hewlett has joined us. Glenn, are you there?
Hi, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. How are you, Glenn?
Okay, it's first time for using Skype, so.
Hey, glad to have you here. Mr. Pac-Man himself is here, and Mr. 3D printed CoCo case.
Yay!
Nice to be on, guys.
Yeah. So, and again, I would like to, I know we've kind of gotten a little bit deep on it too, which is fine, but I would like to do this as a formal topic at some point in time where we can do demonstrations too. So more than happy to have Glenn chime in as well, but I don't want to give away the entire cow, so maybe just give a saucer of milk so we can save the feast for another discussion. Because I think it's a fascinating topic, and I also think it would be really cool to show off some visual examples of good and bad examples of what sprites look like on old games and new games, and things like double buffering versus non-double buffering with the flickering and things like that. It'd be kind of cool to show off different examples of these,
And by the way, sorry, Glenn, I will let you speak.
Oh, that's okay. I don't know, actually. I just got home, so I don't know what you guys were talking about as far as the sprites so far. It's just that I've, working on Pac-Man, first I just wanted to make sure it was running, so I was doing straight copies of, background, then my sprite data to the foreground, and then so on, copy and paste type of thing. And then I learned about stack blasting, so I recoded the whole thing for that, and then watching one of these CoCo Talks a few weeks ago, or I guess a couple of months now. That's when I heard Curtis Boyle, I think, mention compiled sprites, and what the heck is this? So then, of course, checking out the internet, and there wasn't a lot of information either on compiled sprites. I guess because most hardware has sprite hardware. Most computers have sprite hardware built into them, right? So it's I don't know if it's unique to the CoCo itself, but definitely, there's not too many computers around, I guess, that don't have that hardware or capable to use it, maybe.
Mm-hmm. You would be surprised. Actually, yeah. I was studying other systems last week, following a conversation we had in the previous CoCo Talk about the other 6809 computers in the world, and we discovered that there were no CoCo users in France, and we were wondering. Well, I found why. There's the Thomson series of computers, and they like the CoCo. They don't have. They're based on the same CPU. They don't have any hardware to help with the graphics, just like the CoCo. So, but their graphics modes are very different from the CoCo. So the strategies they would use to make video games and to make sprites using software are completely different because the challenges are different. And I could come back with that. It's quite interesting, actually.
The old Apple II, I don't think, has any dedicated sprite graphics hardware either. I mean, that thing basically says,
and something that's missing from lots of 8-bit computers is the relocation of the video screen. On the CoCo, you can relocate the the screen over different areas in memory. It allows for some sorts of scrolling, but also double buffering, and you don't have that on other systems, so it's even worse.
Hugo?
Yeah.
Really would like to hear your talk about that with the stuff, since I don't speak French, and the Thompson's machines were in French. It's a little hard for me to understand the Go, so would really like to hear an in-depth discussion of those machines from somebody who can speak French and can translate it to us.
Well,
dummies who don't.
You'll be happy to know that I'm preparing a PowerPoint presentation on that, which explains how the inner workings of the Thomson, comparing it to the CoCo, and also comparing it to the Japanese 6809 computer, the FM7 and 77, showing how good they were in graphics, how graphics were programmed, what were some of the good games, and of course the Thomson was a flicker fest. It was terrible. For games, but it was not designed for games. It was designed for education. So really, the focus was not on providing the hardware functions for programming games. So yes, and Glenn, the arcade Pac-Man, was it using double buffering, or is it? I know the background is black, so you can redraw with a little black border and erase the little trail where you were previously. That will reduce the flicker instead of erasing and redrawing the sprite each cycle. So what are you using as a strategy to reduce the flicker?
Actually, that's exactly what I'm doing. Because Pac-Man, when he draws over anything, it gets erased. So they still don't have to worry about Pac-Man itself. It's really just the ghosts. So the ghosts, you really just got to worry about the pellets and then the power pills and the fruit in the middle. So I'm kind of just getting to check where the ghosts are on screen, and if they're at a certain spot, redraw a power pill or the fruit or a pill if it's been eaten. So it's not too bad that way. So I don't really have to worry about double buffering. I'm hoping if I get these sprites to go fast enough, it should just be good enough without worrying about buffering the screens.
Yeah, Nick was mentioning too that black backgrounds definitely make things simpler because there's less you have to worry about. We have a couple people chiming in chat. Scott Wendt had said that there's definitely no sprites on the Apple II. Also, the high-res graphics memory is a bit strange to work with due to the order of the bits being designed for output to the video. Curtis Boyle saying the same thing. Apple II doesn't have sprite hardware, and the screen isn't even contiguous between the memory map and the screen scan line order. I've seen that where it looks like it's this really weird interlacing pattern where it goes in like eighths of how it kind of paints in the screen. Very odd. I do need to wrap this up in a couple of minutes. I got my family keeps opening the door, peeking in on me, so they're kind of like, dude, are you done yet?
But just a short comment. We don't know how lucky we are with the CoCo and its linear video modes. Mm-hmm. We don't know how lucky we are until we look at the other computers from the 8-bit era. Most of the video modes are terrible, really terrible to program. It's insane. I'll come back on that when my PowerPoint is ready.
That's one of the things that used to drive me crazy when I was in like grade school and stuff. All of the people with their pissing contests on which computer was better. And, you have the Apple camp and the Atari camp, and everybody's saying that their computer is better than the other computers. And I kept saying, well, number one, what's better is kind of subjective, but what can you do with that computer? Or what can you make that computer do for you? Because I could run circles in BASIC around anybody else's computer and what they could do in BASIC. So what's best and what's good. I mean, there were a lot of things about that machine that were just incredible. And on top of, like you're saying, linear memory, and everybody I've talked to says the 6809 is a joy to program for in assembly. So when I learn assembly, I'm going to, have an easier transition to that. But another thing that was great for me on the CoCo was learning Microsoft Basic, which translated straight to MS-DOS, and learning Disk Extended Color Basic by Microsoft, which was stepping stone to MS-DOS as well. So the fact that not only did we have a great hardware and great memory map, but the fact that we had Microsoft making our core software, it was a very seamless transition for me to enter into computer technology with the IBM PC and the compatibles. There's so many things you can look back and say, I am so glad for it. There's a million things we could look back and say, well, I wish they did this and I wish they did that, or I wish they didn't do this. But we can look at the CPU, we can look at the memory, and we can do a lot of things and say, wow, I feel completely fortunate that I chose the computer I chose, because I don't even know if I would have been interested in programming or computers if I had to learn how to do it on an Apple or Atari, because I mess with those things and they weren't easy and basic, and that's where my mind was. I had to be able to think and produce in BASIC, and if it was an obstacle to me, it wasn't entertaining or enjoyable, So I'm thankful that I chose the CoCo. And look at look at all the friends I have here. I wouldn't have had. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, the Apple wasn't too bad in BASIC, but when you got into machine code, the 65 was a very limited CPU capacity.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to wrap this up here in just a minute. You guys have any closing thoughts? Anything you guys want to plug or promote or talk about, or seeds you want to plant for next week and things we can continue to talk about?
Okay, I'd like to say something and try to be quick about it for you. First, to Hugo, enjoyed your talk. And Glenn, keep me in your loop what you're doing. I can probably help in certain ways. Plus, I'm sure I'd learn a little bit from you guys, too. So do that. Those who wanting to order anything from me, of course, my John Strong, and I'm at Hotmail. You can do any orders with that. But enjoyed the very clear explanation of compiled sprites that Hugo gave. Thank you.
Hey, actually, John, I got a question for you. Would you mind sending me some of that source code for the sound chip? Because I wouldn't mind trying it on the Nano as well.
I am just checking that. Is this Bill speaking or who?
Yes.
Yeah, I just actually have the Nano up on the PC and trying to do that. Once I have it running, I will be sharing what I'm doing. Okay. So I've actually got it up in the EdTazzle and stuff. I'm about ready to step through it and see if I've got it right. Okay. So I do plan to share that information out. And also, feel free to Skype me on a voice call at any time. There's some things I'd like to talk to about those things on it, and some suggestions that I would like to make to Roger. And perhaps if more than one of us make the same suggestion, he might consider it.
Oh, for sure.
So, okay. And I know you've been working with him very closely, a lot closer than I have, because I've been busy doing other things. But so to help that, there's some things that,
yeah, I usually talk to Roger daily. So,
yeah,
I would just like to throw out there too, for all of you who have knowledge of sprites and sprite methods, put your thinking caps on something we can do for a formal sprite presentation, whether it be any code samples that I can run and show off to people. And make it as visual as possible too, because I would love to do a full sprite special where we can just talk about how we do sprites, and let's show how some of the older games did it and how some of the better games did it, and how you guys who are doing it now, some of the techniques you're doing, and any visual sample that you could show, that we could show the people watching this live too, I think would be helpful. So just plant that seed and let it,
okay, Steve,
fertilize that.
About that, Steve, we can actually go back about a year or year and a half and look at something Hugo, I, and Lee Patterson were working on optimizing an imaginary sprite.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on Lee Patterson's blog, the 8-bit blog.
Okay.
And there's a whole how we took a simple routine I made.
That's the one I was mentioning earlier. I didn't remember who took part of this friendly competition. So yeah, it's on Lee Patterson's blog. It's really what gave me the impulsion to learn more about 6809 programming. At this point, I was really about to quit.
Yeah, and Nick has always been friendly and answered. I haven't asked him much questions, but I'm available. If you have any questions and things, I might not be using the particular techniques that you guys are using, but I might be. I've done stack blasting for years. I've got a sprite compiler. Of course, I haven't optimized it yet because I didn't need to. So feel free to ask questions, okay? And I'm not offended if you don't want to use what I do. That's fine. Just sometimes that extra idea would say, "Hey, that's a good idea, but I got one I want to try." That's what that's all about.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, John. Because you've been on the scene a lot longer than any of the rest of us have. And
Translation: you're old.
Well, we've got some people here that's got, it's good. Nick is
old is
really good at what he does.
Old is good. Look at the CoCo.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say
Rick Adams is coming up to speed quite nicely.
Yeah, I think Simon's trying to finish us. I'm sorry I cut you off, Simon. My bad.
You're all right. You're right. What I'm trying to say to John is that thank you very much for extending that courtesy, because a lot of the older guys from the scene are probably not willing to share, because back in the day it was like, oh, this is kind of, I know shit and you don't,
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that now. This knowledge sharing, this crowdsourcing of sharing things, which is great to see.
Well, the other issue there is, back in the day, some people were making their living on it.
Yeah. It was job security.
Their spatial skill set and knowledge was how they got the contracts over the other person. Therefore, it was their personal interest not to share too much for that reason. So it wasn't all ego, even though I'm sure a good portion of that was occurring.
And thank all you guys. Simon too. Simon's great for sharing all his.
I always tried to share
too.
all my information with anyone I came in contact with. My experience was that I always learned a few bits and whatnot from them, and they retained some of what I told them, but they never, there was always something that they missed, and I always had, I always stayed ahead of the crowd because I was sharing information with so many different people.
Roger that. Pay it forward.
This is Bruce Moore here. I just want to shout out to Simon. He's been really helpful to me lately with keeping my Force to Do momentum going here. The guy's just been fabulous, and I'm so grateful for his assistance.
Yay,
Simon!
Yay, Simon!
Yay, Simon! Let's all reach out and do a big circle pat on the back here. Let's all pat ourselves on the back. Big
guys,
group
I
group
need
hug.
to drop.
We're ending the call. We're ending the call now. This is great. I want to thank everybody who's been watching. 2 hours goes by quickly when you're having fun talking about the CoCo, which means we got plenty more to talk about next week. Same time, same channel. And for everybody who's here now, Hugo, David, John Strong, Barry Nelson, Richard, Mark, Bill Noble, Simon Jonason, Bruce Moore, Glenn Hewlett, and everybody else who has been in the chat. Curtis Boyle has been with us. James Ross has been with us. I'm scrolling back through the chat right now. Scott Wendt was here. Who else was here? Alexander Wallace was here from Mexico. Michael Brandt was here. Who else was here chatting with us? James Ross, I think I mentioned that. Michael Lobieski. Help me pronounce your name again, Michael. It's Lorbieski. Ed Snyder was here. Michael Brandt, I mentioned that. We got all kinds of people here. Darren Grant was here. Glenn Hewlett was here in the chat. Now he's here on the call. Yeah, lots of people. Bosco was here from the UK as well. Steve Bamford, author of Flagenbird, was here earlier. Lots of people joining us in chat, joining us live. Lots of people on the call. I want to thank you all. It's been another great CoCo Talk. We got lots more to talk about, and we'll look forward to doing it next week. So thank you all who were here, and thank you all who watched, and we'll see you next time. CoCo forever, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
CoCo Nation.
CoCo Nation. Bye-bye.